I want to talk about something that's happening at the UN this week in Geneva, and maybe talk with you in more detail about it tomorrow, just because we haven't got time today. A delegation of disabled activists from the UK have travelled to Geneva this week to get involved in a process whereby the UN is holding the UK government to account for its continuing breaches of the UN Disability Convention. We speak a lot, don't we, about, well, perhaps not often enough, actually, which is why I'm keen to do something more later in the week. But we do on this programme, I think, speak a lot about disability rights and attitudes towards people with disabilities as well, and how, disabilities can come in so many forms, which is often forgotten. Which is why I'll wait and see what comes of this process in Geneva, and we'll talk about it a little later in the week. But for now, Dan White joins me to talk about it and what exactly is going on. Spokesperson for Disability Rights UK, and a fairly familiar voice on the programme. Good afternoon to you, Dan.
Good afternoon, Sheila. Thanks for having me on again, and thanks for raising this subject today.
It's a pleasure. First things first, what is the UN Disability Convention that they say we keep breaching?
It's the UNCRPD, which is the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Disabled People. Effectively, it's something that protects our rights and sets them in stone across the country. Just makes life easy for disabled people, which is essentially what it should be. But we're finding under this current government that life, in fact, is getting worse and getting harder.
And what will the UN be looking at?
They're looking at everything. They're looking at transport, they're looking at the benefits system, they're looking at housing, they're looking at the rise, unfortunately, of institutions where disabled people, instead of having the right to independent living, are ending up. So essentially, they're looking at everything, all the violations that have been happening right across the board.
Well, and for people who might not know the background, the context, the UK has already been found to be in, quotes, grave and systematic violations of that convention.
They have. I think the UN first visited, I think it was 2016, 2018, when they did their initial report. And then last year there was an evidence session in August 2023, which the UK government refused to attend, requesting a delay, obviously, till yesterday. But we've just seen the dismantling of our basic human rights right across the board. I mean, disabled people in the UK now lacking proper access to food, water and sanitation, and this in a first world country.
And what does the government say in response?
The government has said in response, well, initially they had the first chat yesterday, and it was literally a case of lauding themselves and patting themselves on the back, celebrating the Disability Action Plan and the Disability Strategy, both sadly which lack any transformative change. And really it was just a case of this is what we're doing, effectively being unresponsive or even acknowledging the crisis is happening under their watch.
And does this run the problems that you alluded to, or the omissions that you alluded to, does it run parallel essentially to the timeline of austerity, or does it predate austerity?
Oh, predates austerity, but disabled people have always been on the cusp of poverty, or even worse, what with incredibly low benefits and just the social model of disability, which is the fact that people are not disabled by their disability, they're disabled by the fact that they cannot access society because it's not built to include them. So this has been a long process. But unfortunately, COVID has exacerbated this, and the cost of living has exacerbated this to an even more fierce degree.
And in what way specifically? I know you and I have spoken about it, but just for the purposes of people who might not have heard those conversations.
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, the benefit system, for instance, the benefit system has always been below par. It's always been something that successive governments have gone to when they need a scapegoat to blame people for the country's financial state. But even the UN found that the benefit system devalues disabled people and undermines their human dignity. They found that reforms within social welfare benefits are premised on the notion that disabled people are undeserving and skiving off and defrauding the system. And unfortunately, rhetoric like this has seen a rise in hostility and hate towards disabled people. It's just basically completely unfair.
The Disability Discrimination Act, 20 plus years ago when it was brought in, was meant to a degree anyway, remove some of these obstacles, either physical obstacles or access to services, access to jobs and the like. On a scale of, let's say 1 to 10, how effective has it been?
It's been effective in some cases. Obviously, it's give disabled people greater freedom to enjoy work and stuff like that. But unfortunately, it seems to have been non-binding for a lot of people, and the whole thing around it seems to be a bit weak, if you see what I mean, because we haven't seen any real successive change since it's come in. It's obviously helped a bit, but we need to be stronger. We need the government to actually acknowledge the damage that's been done. We need them to accept responsibility of what's happened. We need them to follow the UN guidelines and actually readdress the problems that they are creating through their policies which are killing disabled people, not to put too fine a point on it.
And to what degree does the UN have any teeth here?
That we will wait and see. Obviously, this will go off again to go into another report. I don't know when the final say will be coming along, but obviously the UN monitor, I don't know what legality they have in order to force the government to do this. I don't know how it all stands. Obviously, we're pulling out of things like Brexit and stuff like that. So I don't really know, but we would hope the government would see sense and, like I said, acknowledge their culpability, acknowledge there are grave and systematic violations of the rights of disabled people in the UK, and actually do something about it, because we are feeling that the government do not value our lives. We feel we are an inconvenience. We feel we are something to be tolerated and fed scraps, but we are human beings, men, women and children. Yeah,
and you and I spoke during the cost of living crisis, like it's over. Yeah. It's not, but the fuel crisis in particular, when it was at its height. And your daughter, for example, needed her equipment charging, that kind of thing. Heat was important in the house because of a condition that she has. It's things like that that perhaps people with no experience of disability just don't even think about, don't even take into account.
They don't, and it's not their fault. It's just the fact that these things aren't really highlighted. And unfortunately, when they are highlighted, and unfortunately usually in the arena of the lurid tabloid press, they're always done as a negative reaction, which is really, really sad. I mean, there was a lot with energy that the government could do.
When you say a negative reaction, do you mean like the disabled person is being the whinger kind of thing?
Yeah, being the whinger. And we had it last year, and it's even crept into this year, where the benefit system has been attacked and disabled people, as I said, have been seen as scroungers or work shy, which is just really not the case. It's just horrible rhetoric. It's horrible, and it just needs to stop.
Well, I'll do my level best this week, and let's see what else goes on in the UN, and we'll hopefully get some calls on it as well. Thank you, Dan, for talking to me today. Dan White, spokesperson for Disability Rights UK.